know what it was to rest. I just work all the time from morning till late at night. I had to do everything they wanted to do on the outside. Work in the field, chop wood, hoe corn, till sometimes I feel like my back shoulder break. I done everything except split rails. You know they split rails back in them days. Well, I never did split no rails. Old Ma strop us good if and we did anything he didn't like. Sometime he'd get his dander up and then we dancing the ground at him. Else he tie your hands for your body and whip you just like you a mule. Lord, honey, I stuck 1,000 lashings in my day. Sometimes my poor old body be so for weak. Oh, boss, he send us niggas out to any kind of weather. Rain or snow, it never mattered. We had to go to the mountains, cut wood, and drag it down to the house. Many of the time we come in with our clothes stuck to our poor cold bodies, but 'twarn't no use to try to get them dry. If the old boss or the old missy see us, they yell, "Get on out of here, yo black thing, and get your work out in the way." And Lordy, honey, we know to get, else we get the lash. They didn't care how old or how young you was, you never too big to get the lash. The rich white folk never did no work. They had darkies to do it for them. In the summer, we had to work outdoors. In the winter, in the house. I had a card and spin till 10 o'clock. Never get much rest. And to get up at 4 the next morning and start again. Didn't get much to eat neither. Just a little cornbread and molasses. Lordy, honey, y'all can't know what a time I had. All cold and hungry. No, I ain't telling no lies. It's the gospel truth. Sure is. I remember well how I used to lie awake till all the folks were sleeping, then creep out in the door and walk barefoot in the snow about 2 miles to my old auntie's house. I knowed when I get there, she fixed hot corn pone with slice of meat and some milk for me to eat. Auntie was good to us darkies. I never sleep on a bedstead till after freedom. No, till after freedom. Just an old pile of rags in the corner. Hardly enough to keep us from freezing. Oh, child, nobody knows how mean darkies was treated. Well, they was better to the animals than to us. And my first old boss was a good old man, but the last one, he was rabid. He sure was rabid. My child, times ain't no more like they used to be than the day and night am like. In my day and time, all the folks worked. If they had no niggas, they worked themselves. If the children was too small to hold, they pulled weeds. Now, the big bottom of the Swanner North, that used to grow hundreds bushel of green in just a playground. I like to see the children in the field. Why, now they fight you like a wildcat if it ever been talked about. That's the reason time's so hard. No farming. Why, I can remember old Missy, she said, this generation will pass away and a new generation will come along. That's just it. Every generation gets weaker and weaker. Then they talk about going back to old times. That time done gone. They never meet that time again. None of the slaves off on our plantation ever sold, but the ones on the other plantation of Moss Williams was. Oh, that was a terrible time.
What's up, y'all? Yeah. One, it's important that we ground this conversation and this celebration in reality. So, on behalf of the University of Denver, the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and the Black Community Initiatives, I welcome you to our Juneteenth educational kickoff. We have a treat for you this evening. We think it's important to start our conversation off with context. and more importantly, our celebration off with context. So we will get an educational grounding but from Dr. Ashley Lawrence Sanders, followed by our outstanding panel members sharing about what Juneteenth means for them in their various areas of influence and how to continue to build Black institutions in Denver and the surrounding communities. Should probably introduce myself. Good evening. One more time. Good evening. Thank you. I am John Robinson Miller IV. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Associate Director of Black Community Initiatives and DEI here at the University of Denver. Before we begin the program, I, in my tradition, would like to ask permission from an elder in the room. Because we're on a college campus, elder can be used a little differently. So I'm going to ask somebody who has been in Denver for more than 10 years. Has anybody been in Denver for more than 10 years? All right, 15, 20, 25, 30. Okay, so I'm just gonna ask permission from the folks here. Do I have permission to begin this program? Thank you. We hit next one more time. So we first start with a land acknowledgement. Denver is home to many different citizens of indigenous nations, and we recognize their enduring presence on this land by paying respects to their elders, both past and present. Please take a moment to consider the legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and resettlement that bring us together today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at all of our public events. Now is the time to reflect upon and personally reconcile how the genocidal acts against Indigenous communities intersect with our learning, collaboration, and sharing of knowledge. I also want to speak the names of the traditional territories of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and the Ute nations. Okay. Secondly, I want to give a labor acknowledgement. I am here to acknowledge my ancestors. We must remember and understand that this country and our institutions are built on the many unpaid, uncredited, and disrespected backs of folks who were subjected to enslavement. Let us remember that their contributions and their lives and that their humanity means something. We thank them for all of the things that we will never know and never understand. The cries that we will never hear and the courage it took to survive. We acknowledge the blood that was shed, the families broken, and the hopes and dreams of the slave. We acknowledge those who made something out of nothing and that we are all closer to them than we can ever imagine. We honor Black lives taken too soon, Black brilliance locked up behind bars, Black bodies bound up in systems, Black mental health terrorized by racism, Black trans lives cut short by ignorance. We denounce anti-Blackness in all of its forms and seek to become intimately familiar with the taste of liberation for all. And with the importance that our breath is a reminder of our resistance and humanity. Please take a breath with me. I will now invite up Dr. Ashley Lawrence Sanders to give our educational grounding. Sorry, one more thing, feel free to come on up. So because we are here and we are in BCI space, right? This world is BCI space. We bring in Black cultural elements and influences. So when we give applause for somebody, I like to have a little rhythm to it, right? As a people, as a polyrhythmic people, we typically like to give our shout outs, right? And also when we applaud, we typically, everybody's on their own accord. But I'm gonna introduce a little bit something different for us. I'm gonna do the full thing and then you repeat after me. You gotta wait for the full thing now, all right? And you gotta do the that is the positive energy, right? So as you pushing it out, but the person who is receiving it is taking it in. So you wanna push out as much just for your appreciation, all right? So we are going to give Dr. Ashley Lawrence Sanders a welcome.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I am so happy to be with you all here today to give this very, very brief historical grounding so we can hear from all these excellent folks about Juneteenth in Denver. Just a little bit about myself. I am 2 years into being professor at CU Boulder. I am originally from South Carolina. John and I are joking that we might be cousins. I don't know. Might be. Everybody's a cousin until found out otherwise, if you're from South Carolina. So, you know, we're both from Low Country, both Geechee folks. So, you know, we made that connection. Just so you know that this is a history that's extremely important to me. You know, personally, one that I study, but also one that, you know, I give a lot of myself and time and thinking to, right? About things that my own ancestors have experienced and stuff that I also write about. So I want to talk specifically about Juneteenth a little bit, much of which you guys probably already know, but just in case people don't know, right? So first of all, a brief history of Juneteenth. So Juneteenth begins, right, in 1865. And I have to back up and say, we're celebrating emancipation in this country for a long time because emancipation was an ongoing process. People were freed over and over again. Back in the 1820s, people in New York celebrated emancipation when they finally got their final emancipation in 1827, almost 30 years after the Gradual Emancipation Act passed in 1799, right? In 1838, people start celebrating the British abolition of slavery in the West Indies, right? And people in the US take that on August 1st as their date for a very long time until the Civil War happens, right? So what happens in the Civil War? We get the Emancipation Proclamation, right? It goes into effect January 1st, 1863. Many enslaved people celebrate on that day. South Carolina, we celebrate. Enslaved people, Beaufort and the Low Country are celebrating because the Union troops already occupy. We have traditions that date back to that date. Some of the watch night services, I mean, you guys know a watch night, go to Black churches, services date back to that night. People watching for the clock, right? Still, if you go to a Black church on midnight now, you know, late night and New Year's Eve, you will still have that same thing. Watchmen, what time is it, right? Up until New Year's, and that it dates back to watching the clock for when the Emancipation Proclamation would go into effect. So how do we get this Juneteenth moment? Well, because not everybody is freed when the Emancipation Proclamation is issued. First of all, it only frees enslaved people in Confederate territory, right? So that's just the Confederate states. That means even states like Tennessee, which is a Southern state where there are enslaved people, they are not immediately freed by the Emancipation Proclamation. They actually celebrate their Emancipation Day often on August 8th, which is the day when then military governor and eventual vice president and president, Andrew Johnson, freed his own enslaved people. Yes, he owned many enslaved people himself. He did, even though he was a union, you know, a unionist. So people are not freed immediately by the Emancipation Proclamation. A lot of people are still enslaved until the very end of the war. Many people are still running though, hundreds of thousands throughout the war, even when they are not immediately freed. 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation is issued, 2 months after the end of the Civil War, after Appomattox, after people shake hands, war is over, then we get to Texas, right? Texas is probably the most westernmost place where we have enslaved people. Union troops arrive there and they issue this General Order Number 3, which is also known as the Texas Emancipation Proclamation. Essentially, they say the people of Texas informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the US, this is referring to the Emancipation Proclamation, by the way, all slaves are free. This is June 19th, 1865, right? So we get this sort of moment, right? And this is, they say the last people. I have to be a historian. I'm saying there are still enslaved people after this moment too. Technically, a year later, when we have the final treaties from the Indian Territory nations, there are still thousands of people enslaved in those territories until 1866 legally. So got to be a historian there in a little bit. But people say this is the last sort of final issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation in the United States. So this is where we get the celebration. And it's almost near an immediate celebration. So from the WPA narratives, we heard an excellent sort of vocal narrative at the beginning of our program tonight. We get this narrative for Felix Haywood. Felix Haywood was born in Mississippi, born enslaved in Mississippi, and then taken from Mississippi into Texas. So he's one of these people that actually gets notified, right, when this June 19th moment comes. And he talks about this in the WPA narratives. You guys are familiar. These are the formerly enslaved people who talk in these narratives. Some of them are problematic, but some of them are actually a great source for understanding what enslaved people went through. And he says, soldiers are all of a sudden everywhere. They're coming in bunches, walking and riding. Everybody was singing. We was all walking on golden clouds. Hallelujah. I love this part where he says at the end, he says, everybody went wild. We all felt like heroes and nobody had made us that way but ourselves, right? He's telling you, just like that, we were free. Nobody had made us heroes but ourselves. I then love that line. Because we have as formerly enslaved people already articulating that they knew that they played a role in their own emancipation. So from this moment, right, of this, June 19th, 1865 moment, we get the earliest sort of celebrations of Juneteenth. Immediately in 1866, we get the first celebrations. Celebrations are like a lot of other Emancipation Day celebrations that happen all across the nation. There are parades, there are picnics, there are lots of church-sponsored events. There's lectures and presentations. Almost all Emancipation Day events, whether they're Juneteenth or other events, are almost all sort of binaries, right? They're huge celebrations and parties, some of them so raucous that some of the city editors of the papers were like, nah, we can't have those parades anymore. People are getting too crazy in those streets. We had a little bit of like, can't have that happen on there. But there's huge, public celebrations of freedom and life, but also they're grounded in the political moments of the time as well, the political expediency of what Black people needed and wanted at the different times. So a lot of the speeches are talking about the moment during Reconstruction. It's about the politics of Reconstruction, right? The dangers that awaited African Americans. Late 19th century, it's about Jim Crow, right? It's about losing the right to vote. Early 20th century, we get, some stuff about the state constitutions changing. At these Juneteenth celebrations, this is an image from 1900 in Texas. We see formerly enslaved people who are still survivors who are given these honored roles. Right? These are formerly enslaved people dressed up at a Juneteenth celebration. They're honored, they're remembered, right? In these moments. I mean, Felix Haywood's interview is from 1937, so we know that there are enslaved people who live a very long time into the 20th century. So they're given these sort of honored positions at these celebrations. And I say multiple emancipation celebrations because, if you're like me, you know that Emancipation Day, my last count, there are at least 13 or 14 different days that have been celebrated historically within US history. I mean, at least that I can count, January 1st being a really notable one in South Carolina. I said August 8th, August 1st. There's also April 15th, 16th in DC. That's a DC holiday, Emancipation Day. There's like September 22nd in Ohio. There's a lot of days. And Black people celebrated those days, right? They celebrated those days. So in Colorado, the early sort of Black population celebrated these days, even before they started to have Juneteenth celebrations. So this is from the Denver Star, Black newspaper, July 18, 1914. You see here, this is a celebration in Golden for Emancipation Day. I don't even know what Emancipation Day they're celebrating. It could be the August 1st, it could be the August 8th, but they're having something August 4th, right? So you see there's this annual outing, beautiful foothills. There's going to be an athletic competition. Looks like a boxer, somebody boxing in the old form. But yeah, you see all of these advertisements. Some of them are around January 1st Emancipation Days in the older Colorado papers. Some of them around August Emancipation Days. Celebrating emancipation has a huge tradition. As long as there have been Black people here, Black people have been celebrating emancipation. because those people were enslaved and they were going to be celebrating freedom no matter where they were. So they were bringing these traditions with them. So we bring traditions with us, right? This is how Juneteenth moves from what becomes, starts as a very Texas specific, right? Celebration to celebration that ends up in places like Denver and Los Angeles and Seattle and Buffalo. And part of it is the Great Migration, right? 6 million Black people approximately move across the nation from 1915 to around 1965. Many of us, if we're Black, know that we have family members or maybe grandparents, aunts, uncles, et cetera, people who may have migrated in the Great Migration somehow. This is how people end up spread throughout the country, dispersed from the South, right? In Denver, right, there is a huge Black Texan contingent in Denver. Historically, I would see it even in the newspapers in Denver. The earliest celebrations in the 1950s started by 5 Points business leaders, Otha Rice, originally from Texas. But also during this time period, you get to the 60s and 70s, I think Juneteenth celebrations start to pick up nationwide also as we start to reclaim a lot of Black heritage and Black cultural pride during that same time period. This is a flyer I got from the Denver Public Library. I love this flyer. It's a 1996 flyer. So the 30 years of family fun, around sort of Juneteenth. But, this long history of Juneteenth in Denver, even before this national holiday is, part of like how much, Black people have brought into Denver also when they have come from different places arriving into Colorado. So I just wanted to close with probably the most recent historical development, of course, with Juneteenth, which was the creation of it as a national holiday, or as I like to call the nationalization of Juneteenth, perhaps. So of course, President Joe Biden signed this bill to make Juneteenth a federally recognized holiday. You see him here, he's surrounded by members of the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus. Ms. Opally, who did a lot of work, right, since the 1980s and 90s to actually make Juneteenth into a national holiday, advocated for it for several decades. The bill passed, of course, in a moment of extreme violence and tension in our nation's history. That's approximately why it was expedited. It passed unanimously in a divided Senate, almost unanimously in a divided House with some notable exceptions. And of course, this is the recognition. There was a lot of sort of nationwide celebration around the recognition and some critiques, some criticisms as well, I think, around the nationalization of the holiday and what it's meant for people who traditionally celebrated it across the country as well. And I think that, where we've ended up on Juneteenth is, understanding this one Juneteenth as one of many, right, dates where Black people can celebrate emancipation. I say we can celebrate any day. I mean, there's like 15 of them, sure. I don't think you can celebrate as many as you want, right? But also understanding the long sort of history and meaning of Juneteenth over time as being like one of these sort of central Black holidays. A notable thing is that the last federal holiday that was created before Juneteenth was MLK Day in 1983. So we can take with that whatever lessons we want to take from that. I think it'd be interesting to hear from our panel of Black Denverites. I'm new here, Denverites. Later, because I'm very interested in hear how people view Juneteenth in light of the long history of it and of these recent developments as well. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Christopher Witt. I'm the Vice Chancellor of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at the University of Denver. Thank y'all for coming. Thanks to John and Lexus and Claire and the whole team for putting this together. I'm going to take a moment to introduce our panelists, and we will then have them come on up and we're going to have a conversation. When we're engaged in that conversation, I mean, we have a nice intimate crowd here. So as we have natural pauses in the conversation, if anybody has a question, please let us know. And we will try to make sure that we answer, engage in whatever question you may have. Also, there'll be a few times where I may turn to Clara over there, who's keeping an eye on the folks who are engaged with us via, I believe, Zoom or one of our online platforms. You know, shout out to all of those. And, you know, if we have any questions coming in from there, we'll go ahead and address that. So I'll have our panelists come up as I introduce them. And then once we're seated, we'll let everyone give a little bit about themselves. What did we say, 90 seconds? So 90 seconds, panelists. So I'm gonna give your name and stuff and have you come up here. And then when it's your time to introduce yourself, 90 seconds. All right. So we have Lex Dunbar. Come on up. Oh. We have Khadijah Haynes. Come on up. We have Norman Harris. Please join us. We have Ashley Lawrence Sanders. Come on up. Oh, my bad. We've already been joined by you. So please if we mess something up, fix us from the audience, please. Check us. My bad. And I am so sorry if please correct me if I mess up your name. Itef, DJ Kevin Vita, come on up. Brother, did I get it right or did I not get it right? I gotta get it right. So I'm gonna listen to you when you introduce yourself. And me, I'm the last person. So as I said, we're gonna go around and let everybody get 90 seconds. So why don't you start us off?
Peace and blessings, y'all. Full name is Omibade Ifashegu, also known as the warrior that never lost a battle. The name that I go by here in America is Itef Otep Vita. Got a PhD in urban ecology from the East Side, representing 5 Points all day. And I grow food, teach kids how to grow food through hip hop. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you.
Greetings. My name is Norman Harris. I am a Juneteenth advocate since 2012. I've helped lead Denver's Juneteenth celebration here in Denver. And since my establishment date, I've been a part of Juneteenth here in Denver. Beyond all that, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a father. I love my community. I love my city. I love my people.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Khadijah Haynes. I'm a native Denverite, about 5 generations. I think we share that. And I work in the political ecosystem. I work in the education ecosystem, and I work in the arts.
Sweet. I'm Lex Dunbar. I am a North Philly native, but I've been in Denver for 3 years. I represent Black Pride Colorado, who have events tonight and all this weekend, so they couldn't be here. PhD student at DU and I live in the areas of religion, and that's it.
All right, thank y'all. And for anybody in the audience who may be participating with us in the future on panels, this is how you do it. Everybody we said 90 seconds, they were under 90 seconds. Beautiful job, y'all. So thank you for that. So to give a little bit of context, I'm up here moderating, but for a lot of these questions, I'm gonna be listening just like I'm in the audience because I'm rather new to Denver. I've been in Denver for a little bit over 2 years. So a lot of these questions that we'll talk about have to do with our Denver Black community, Juneteenth here in Denver. So I'm gonna be listening really good to hear more about it. And I grew up in Baltimore, which is one of the blackest cities in America, but surprisingly enough, a lot of people don't recognize it, but Baltimore, because of the location and the history of the city, Juneteenth was never a big thing. It has evolved in recent years, but when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, that really wasn't a big thing. You would hear somebody talk about it here and there, but just because of geography. And earlier we talked about the Great Migration, Juneteenth wasn't a thing. So I'm very interested to hear from you all on the panel, your opinions on the evolution of Juneteenth in Denver and just what you've seen, in, I guess, the long haul, as well as more recently in terms of, where Juneteenth's come from in Denver and where it's headed. So whoever would like to start can go ahead and jump in on that.
Man, Juneteenth. I have a lot of understanding of like where we all come from, but I know from my bloodline. You know, I come from Geechee. You know what I'm saying? Gullah Island, a lot of my family actually was like the actual cowboys that migrated the cows to the west. My great-great-grandfather was you know, Buffalo soldier. I grew up playing with a cavalry sword. You know what I mean? Got a chance to go to like the Black American West Museum as a youth. So when I think about a lot of that ancestral connection, you know, a lot of us kind of still keeping that, you know, indigenous perspective as well. You know what I mean? Like you got the Afro Cherokee, you know what I mean? You have a lot of the brothers and sisters who know where they come from. And before like just the idea that all of us came from the ships, there's also like, you know, the Moors too, you know what I'm saying? And like a lot of the brothers and sisters already here from the like the, you know, descendants of Mali and the big kingdoms as well that we need to acknowledge too. So I think that's been a big perspective on me. But as far as when I think about Juneteenth itself, like it was always the biggest celebration when I was a youth. You know what I mean? The parties was fly. You know what I mean? People had their colors, but at the same time, it was a unit of love. You know, I saw a lot of energy of just the music playing off the end of the corners. You know how 5 Points was. Weldon Street was just so much love with, you know, Dr. Daddio barbecuing on the corner. You know what I'm saying? Like just the things that I remember that I really feel like our community started to adapt to. And now we get a chance to celebrate it with the more young people that are moving to the next generation. I think it is something that is more celebrated nationally. And I'm happy that Colorado's definitely set that off.
You know, DJ Caveman and I are we share similar backgrounds in that we, you know, grew up in the same neighborhoods. We were talking about a church that he was in school with. It was right down the street from me. And so that feeling that he's talking about right there, I think has been the seed for Juneteenth to grow. And I kind of equate it to, I was listening to the doctor talking about these different dates for emancipation. It kind of reminds me of like, well, when was Jesus Christ born? Right? I'm sure somewhere you could go dig and probably find it might not have been December 25th. But if we can get to some crowning moment in which our community can come together, can re-energize, can connect, I think it catapults us. I think it catalyzes our community. And that has been the seed for Juneteenth, these celebrations, us coming together, us hugging each other, us supporting each other. And as youth, there was a time when I was a kid, I had no idea, I didn't know June 19th. I knew it as Juneteenth. Didn't know what day it was coming, but you knew, right? You were preparing for it. You kind of timed out your haircut schedule to make sure that you were just right? You timed out, didn't wear those shoes. You know, you had to clean them off, didn't go play with them on the basketball courts. You could come down there, fly. But as DJ Caban was saying, you know, I think there's something really powerful when our community collectively comes together. Because when you itemize the trauma that so many of us have brought to the table, or so many of us come with, you know, having this core celebration and what it has meant to so many generations and what that does after the celebration is what's helped it grow. So for me personally, those feelings of that nostalgia, and I saw you just kind of smiled when you were thinking about Dr. Daddio and that hot link you might have bought on the corner of 28th and Welton, or, you know, for me, my buddies, we would, you know, early memories would come down with parachute pants, and we would cut up cardboard boxes. We have a jukebox, and we're out there expressing ourselves. That next day, everyone felt like they had been that large family reunion, and just really kind of set the energy for the rest of the summer. So it's important that we as a community come together. We see this happening in other communities, 4th of July, the Valentine's Day, Christmas, whatever, that's going to ground us, right? In our existence, ground us in our purpose, and refocus us on caring for each other. That is like the core value that I've seen, you know, materialize, and has been why Juneteenth has been so strong here.
My experience with Juneteenth in Colorado is back a lot of decades, because I go back a lot of decades. And I think there was a real change in Juneteenth in Denver that happened in the sixties. It makes sense. It happened with the civil rights movement. And we had a fantastic Black Panther Party in Denver. And it was fantastic. And the tone that was Juneteenth before, that was much about liberation and freedom, took those flavors of the civil rights movement and became militant, became forceful, became more about correcting the wrong of enslavement than celebrating the liberation. And that continued for about 20 years into the 80s. And then in the 80s, it began to be that family, more of a family celebration, still with that edge, that came in the 60s. But by that time, in the 80s, it began to have a different kind of political power. Denver, strangely, in the middle of the country, had a huge population of Black folks, mostly because we had the Air Force Base. And we had with the base here, most of the men who were the pilots or who were in the Air Force out of World War II ended up being stationed out of Lowry. We created a huge Black population here, a huge Black middle class and upper middle class population in Denver. And with that came political power. We began to elect people to places, to political office. And when that happens, the economics change. And in the 80s, you begin to see corporations like was then Mountain Bell and Public Service Company. Both of those entities were clients of mine, and they began to place ads in the Black newspapers that you could see that corporations were recognizing the rise and the power of this unusually large Black community, and how Juneteenth was a focal point for us, because it was. It didn't matter where you lived. Of course, nobody lived anywhere but in Denver because it wasn't safe. But we all live fairly centrally. And when you have that huge population, and it's an influential population, it is a population with growing basically, you begin to pay attention. So then we see the economics of Juneteenth begin to weave in through. We see the movement, the Pan-African movement begin to come in. When you're saying you went and got the shoe shine, that was still kind of the church era, and Duncan's men's store down on Wells. But then we begin to see in the 80s the dashikis. We begin to see all of the influence from folks who are really picking up the African heritage that skipped all that time, past emancipation, past liberation, past the civil rights coming into our consciousness. And that weaves itself very strongly into our Juneteenth celebrations. It is interesting that the good doctor talked to us about celebrations in the 1800s, and we couldn't pass a holiday till 2 years ago in the country, and we couldn't pass a holiday in Colorado until last year. The Senators Buckner, Coleman, and Representative Garrett, that was the first we could do. And a bit of history for you. Juneteenth was always on the 19th, or that weekend around the 19th. Pride came in afterwards, mainly put together by white gay men, and they did it on the exact same day as Juneteenth. it became a struggle for politicians. Because we're two influential communities. Where did they show up? Before that, Pride was the week before. And it became regular that all the politicians went out and did Pride that first weekend in June, and everybody was free to come to Juneteenth and spend the whole weekend, both days. The weekend of the 19th. But in the 80s, Pride switched and became a direct competition. So that's a side note. But I think it's important to think about how corporations now are trying to play both sides, but they are more frequently choosing one or the other. We went through a very long period where politicians did not come, would not come, corporations did not support, would not sponsor, but they were sponsoring the Pride stuff. So I just offer that as a tidbit of information in the history of Juneteenth.
I don't support regular pride, so I was talking about Black Pride. But yeah, it's different. I don't. Yeah, but Black Pride specifically.
All right. I would say that I heard you all talk about particularly the 5 Points neighborhood. I heard you talk about, you know, the community coming together, and it really made me start thinking about some of the places and times that we as Black Americans have where people are either joining together in a place or going to a place. You know, you had people flying into New Orleans for Essence. You had, and you know, that's 4th of July weekend, and people not wearing no red, white, and blue and stuff. They going to hear some music and everything. You know, I'm from Baltimore, as I said earlier. We have the AFRAC. It's the African American Festival. Every summer I used to love, as a kid, I'd be so hyped to go to AFRAC. You get food and entertainment. Every city has its own thing. Every area has its own thing. I lived in Omaha for a while. They have Native Omaha Days every other summer. And people from all over the country, Black folks, return to Omaha. And they have concerts and parties. So these types of unifying elements show up all over the country. But it sounded like here in Denver, you all had a special connection and have a special connection with Juneteenth. But something that I said, I admit that I'm a newcomer to Denver, but something that I can't miss is that this is one of the, I guess you could say, sites of hyper gentrification in the United States of America.
Well,
So
I think the point that Khadijah was making, it's so much to go into. We could probably talk about, you could juxtapose. I've been working on this word. Will someone say that for me?
juxtapose.
There you go.
There you go.
You could use that word with Juneteenth, with the plight of Northeast Denver, and they line up right along each other, right? So Khadijah was explaining this timeline. She kind of graciously got to the 80s and didn't probably tell you the flip side. So our neighborhoods were being attacked, drugs, gangs, you know, my mother, we were talking about this the other night, nights that, you know, we were not going outside, right? And so it put this pressure on families to either move, sell their homes and get out of this beautiful community that had been, you know, built up over decades of folks leaving these brutal places such as Texas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, XYZ, coming to the land of opportunity for jobs at the finance center and for the U.S. Air Force and different military things that were here. And so right along the time that we were really getting ready to put our stamp on, as young folks in this community, there was this, you know, terrible things that were happening. And so, yes, this is set within this neighborhood that has experienced change as a lot of urban neighborhoods have. And we've seen the involuntary displacement that has happened. But I do believe that this celebration itself has been the anchor and has created the space when folks can't afford to pay a commercial lease down on Welton Street. Well, through the celebration, We have engaged our community and created a space for them that has not been there for plenty of years. So I do think it would be an amazing thing to really study in terms of how our city has evolved and how this celebration has evolved, because that has had its ups and downs. You study things like a Renaissance, like the Harlem Renaissance. I believe the culture probably comes first, right? It's like what immediately kind of gets in that crack. It's immediately what these outsiders start to attract to, in my opinion, is the culture. And it's our pathway to re-engage ourselves with this community that we have such deep roots to. So the Juneteenth celebration, and I want to just thank, so many folks. You started with Oath of Rice. There are so many people that have carried this Juneteenth flag, right? From Big Al Richardson, who I believe, along with Oath of Rice back in 1953, were the first organizers of Juneteenth. That's 70 years ago. And I bet you 70 years ago in 1953, there was no way that there would be a Juneteenth panel here at the University of Denver, right? Right? They won't even talk about it, wouldn't put it in the curriculum, anything. And those are these folks that have been carrying these flags, people like Wellington Webb, who organized Juneteenth, people like Brother Jeff Fard, who organized Juneteenth, and our committee who continues to carry that flag today. But I do think it has a much higher significance than a music performance or, DJ Cave and my breakdancing out there, right? It has been the cultural anchor that has allowed our folks access to a neighborhood that we have not had access to at that scale in quite some time.
So do you feel that all of the things related to Juneteenth serve as an anchor or a grounding or something that pulls the Black Denver together? Because Black Denver is in no one particular space. Black Denver's all over. So do you all feel that as something that pulls folks together?
I want to talk about what happened with Black Pride, because I'm in total agreement in terms of the politics that pitted communities against each other. And next thing you know, we're competing for resources, for sponsors, for the mayor's time, for the governor's time, and for everyone's time. But also in that space, what there was a division that was created was between groups of Black people themselves. So for years, again, DJ and Cave and I grew up in a time when the Crips and the Bloods would come, and Bloods couldn't come and the Crips couldn't come, one of those two. We're always split, all right? And the time that I've had the opportunity to lead Juneteenth, what has been at the top of the table or the top of the list is the split between our LGBTQIA community and our straight, or whatever you want to call it, community, right? And so I would get calls and got calls over this time frame that we as a community did not create enough, did not have enough trust within the community itself to actually have a large enough Juneteenth community to where everyone felt welcome. And I think these are things that to this day that we still have to work on, admittedly, because when our entire community shows up, right? I get calls from sponsors I never thought would show up that want to support because they understand that we do have numbers. You're not going to go anywhere else in the state and find a collection of 70,000 Black people in one place, but down in the historic 5 Points this Saturday. You won't find another place probably in this whole region where that many Black folks gather. So it's so important that we have conversations like this. It's so important. I'm so proud of being here in this space, proud of John putting this together, because this platform that we're building, it needs to be in a space where we're having these conversations, because again, that brings us all together. It's critically important.
So Lex, there's been a number of times that we've kind of talked about that intersection of Juneteenth as a whole, Black Pride, as well as, the other Pride initiatives, particularly as someone who's newish to the area as am I, but really stepped in and into a leadership role. How are you seeing all of these things?
Yeah, I have a lot of things to say.
It's a panel. That's what you're here for. So go ahead.
I appreciate you bringing that up, and I'm glad we're here. I think if we are going to be serious about starting with Juneteenth and saying, it's more than parties, it's more than, a concert. And if we're going to be serious and talk about liberation, right, and freedom from slavery, right, we have to be serious and talk about that slavery wasn't just in change. It was in chains. It was in ideologies. It was in the way that we understand families and the way that we understand connections and the way that we understand communities. It was in economic systems, right? And so answering the question of like, what does it mean to the Black community? When I saw this, my first response was, which Black community are you talking about? While people may check me and pass me and may, I get less stares or whatever the way I present, right? There are not many Black spaces, whether it be Juneteenth or whatever, here specifically that I've seen in my short 3 years here, where my Black trans friends can show up, Black trans woman friends can show up, right? In their full self without fear. As leaders, I think it is important for us to do that work, to create spaces where folks know that they are welcomed, right? If we think about liberation from slavery, let us also think about the ways that colonialism actually changed and sort of put this white supremacist notion of what sexuality is on us anyways, right? And so our internalized transphobia and homophobia, all of that is tools of white supremacy. And so I want us to have real conversations about liberation that is inclusive of Black trans folks. I want us to have real conversations about liberation that is inclusive of non-binary people, that's inclusive. And never, ever, ever, when I talk about gay people or queer people, am I ever talking about white people? Ever. I just want to be real clear. I do not care. Like, I'm real clear. I am talking about us. There you go. I just want to be real clear with that. And so something that I feel about Black Pride specifically, because let's just like name it, right? Being specific on Juneteenth weekend, we want to celebrate our liberation and we want to do it in safety.
Well, Lex, I purposely kind of brought that up because I would much rather have us have a pretty spicy conversation than
My favorite.
us just talk about, June 19th. I think the Juneteenth that we're working on, that we are working on now, is critically important. I'm a 46-year-old heterosexual Black man, grew up in Northeast Denver. I listened to a lot of gangster rap and as a kid. So you probably have dealt with or met quite a few men who have had the same type of background that leads us to sometimes really poor assumptions and also creates these barriers within our communities. And I can't tell you how important it has been to be pushed into a space of understanding that we, no matter how we look, are what is most important. And so I do believe that there are so many steps, the micro steps, right? This panel is a step. This, the whomever's showing up, however they want to feel comfortable at Juneteenth and feeling welcome is important. But it does take, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable as us sometimes bringing it up. It's uncomfortable sometimes me trying to make sure I don't mess up a word or a letter in terms of, so I don't offend someone. But it's trust that we have to build that I believe has been destroyed through these institutions of slavery and through these systemic institutions of inequality that leaves us, it's either you're dark skin or you're light skin, you're a AK or a Delta, Crip or a Blood, you're straight or you're not, right? So I agree with you 100% that Juneteenth is a platform that will allow us to truly liberate ourselves from even those internal things that hold us back from really being together. So, but there is a lot of work to be done. And so I think in terms of even what that looks like, and I see it, I've seen it, in increments. I've seen a couple more folks of color coming down dressed exactly how they want to be dressed. And at the same time, I still get the murmur in the back. One of my homeboys that I was in the car with, listening to that gangster rap music back in the 90s, like, no, what's going on? I'm like, this is us, right? And we have to be very comfortable with that. Agreed.
In line with that, I would say that I'd like to hear from any of you all, particularly the folks who haven't spoken in a few minutes. We have a lot of variations within the Black community. We just talked about gender and sexuality. We also have, class divides. You talked about colorism. We have divides along lines of education, so many different things. And I'm just wondering, does this bring to mind any examples of times where folks have tried to work across difference in the Black community to lift up the whole Black community, or things that maybe are still to come that are in the works where we're working across these differences? Because sometimes we are pushed to work to build unity outside of our community so much that we almost are forced to forget that we have work to do amongst ourselves, that we have work to do to really make everybody feel welcome and feel like they could be their full and authentic selves. So are there any examples y'all could think of times in the past where you've kind of worked across that difference, and how might it inform us as we move forward?
You go ahead.
Wow. You know what? One of my favorite points out of the 10-point program, Black Panther Party, was had to been around the food, clothing, and shelter. Just for food in general, just the breakfast lunch program, I think not only influenced what we have as just the eating at school program. You know what I'm saying? There's so much that when it talks about liberation, I love that saying, all power to the people. When I think about melanated people around the world, just because you can get sunlight and you get darker, sometimes you're gonna deal with some persecution from some side, right? Some kind of ism. But when I think about it from the perspective of how that relates to our unity, food, clothing, and shelter is what it is, man. I'm not gonna say that, just a joint can change the world, but definitely people get hungry. You know what I'm saying? When you think about just the idea of just growing food, one of the things that I love when we were doing, just adopting some of the things we saw within the Black Panther Party, we did have a year we were giving out organic produce and fresh pressed juice, at Juneteenth, you know what I mean? Free yoga lessons, and just think about just the ideas of wellness, rest is revolutionary. Taking time to take care of your body and health is revolutionary. Stressing out over the government, that's toxic. You know what I'm saying? Stressing out over, what they doing over there, that's toxic. You know what I mean? You really want to take care of yourself. Real revolution looks like staying out of the hospital. Real revolution, real healthcare looks like a juicer and a blender, and you open up your fridge and it look like a garden and not a morgue. I think about the conversation of us changing slavery means that we change the way we eat. We don't eat like slaves. We don't sit here and articulate the ways of straight up. My playlist goes all the way out, from Oyo Tunje down to Metallica, but at the same time, I have balance and I know where we at, and I know where our culture and how much influence we have. I ain't just want to talk about Rosetta Tharpe and, Jimi Hendrix and, Chuck Berry, and know that how much we've influenced rock music, and that's ours too. We want that, we can take that. We don't have to just leave it as soul music and R&B and jazz, we can take that too. But when we think about the culture of really what brings us together, music and food, and that is really the element of that. So, simple things, what I'm saying? Like this. Yeah, take one of those. This is seeds. Saving your own seeds. You know what I mean? So that's a simple conversation of revolution. If you can grow for yourself, I mean, to evolve and change is dope, right? But, if your neighbor right next to you, and your neighbor right next to them, and you just decide to just make a corner crop, you good. Cooperative economics is real better than like we sitting here like slaving around thinking that we gotta like work for somebody else. I'm all into like, land development and gentrification is dope when you owning it. You know what I'm saying? Cooperative development, we can call it something, whatever name you want to give it. At the same time, investing where you come from. If that's through the food, if it's through the people, creating businesses, buying up the land, the mineral rights, the water rights. Deep rock.
Yeah.
I forgot the question.
Shoot, I forgot it too. I was listening. I told you, I'm like an audience member here. But we were talking about the whole idea of working across differences. Working the fact that within the Black community, we have so many variations along lines of faith, education, social, economic class, all that. So are there examples of things that you've seen already in motion or examples of the direction that we're headed that you'd like to speak on in terms of us really working across our differences? And we don't have to stick on this question. We have other things we could talk about.
I'd like to hear Khadijah's thoughts on our generational partnerships and where you think some of our work or areas of our opportunity in terms of the disconnections between generations.
That's really good. That's something that we don't talk about enough of in the Black community, generation. All right. Well, all of us need to talk.
Yes, I may not address it tonight, we'll talk about it. My question to you is why do we have to? Why do Black people have to work across the line? It is said to us as if it is an expectation of us differently. White people don't do that. Asian people don't work across social and economic lines in their own community. Folks in the continent don't either. So I'm not sure that question even resonates with me as a responsibility as a group of people.
Amen.
To work across anything I do because I value it as a human being, not because it's my responsibility because I'm Black. I have different responsibilities because I'm Black. But that ain't one. Or at least that's not one of the ones that I decide that I'm gonna work on. It is my way of being, and we get trapped, I believe, as a people, into taking on, working on my legs.
Say it.
Taking on things that are not ours. They're somebody else's, and if we can be tricked up and bamboozled and like to do it, well, over here something else is happening. I don't appreciate the question.
Yeah, if the question was like about solidarity, because I wasn't sure which part it was, I'm good on it. Folks have a lot of work to do with anti-Blackness in their own communities. Until I can see some consistency in that, I'm going to focus on me and my people, because we do get lost and can be so welcoming and still get the last end of the stick every single time in every effort of solidarity across any other sort of lines. We need solidarity within the Black community. We got our own issues that we need to deal with. There's anti-Blackness in our community. There's anti-fatness in our community. There's homophobia, transphobia in our community. We got work to do. And so I think I want to be in solidarity with Black folks, period.
Well, that's where the question was. It was about solidarity within the Black community, across our differences in the Black community. But yes, I think we're in a similar space, all of us with that. But thinking about that, I know that we're getting close on time. So let me turn to the audience real quick to see in the live audience, any questions, or y'all just going with the flow? Y'all good? All right. Claire, do we have anything? All right. So we're getting close to the end. So I did want to ask a question. I did want to ask a question about what might be missing from conversations around growing Black institutions in Denver and in the surrounding community. And I'd like to add a little, that was something that we talked about before, but I'd like to add something because we are at an institution. We're here at the University of Denver, and we have some Black folks within the institution where we're trying to plug in. So I'm wondering, what work can be done within the Black institutions and what work might be done by Black folks who have access to some of the other institutions in the area to overall lift up Black Denver. So just wondering where you all think, we may have some footholds to be able to build in that space.
Progress moves at the speed of trust. We need to trust each other. We have one of the best brothers that I know, Greg Newman, sitting on the board of trustees over here, doing everything we can. We have Stephanie O'Malley over here. We have you. We have other people that I don't even know are here. But if we don't know you, we don't trust you. Humans are not wired that way. So what needs to happen is we need to spend more time together. And to kind of tie a nice little bow back on this, that's what Juneteenth is about. It's about creating an opportunity for us to see each other, to be with each other, to talk to each other, to know each other so that we can trust each other. And when we trust each other, when we can trust from one generation to the next, then we can have overall progress. When we can trust between people who look or we think are different than us. It's crazy. Listen to that rap music. I can't deal with that. But we've got to get long past all of that so that we can move in trust and have progress in our community. And thank you for your years of working on Juneteenth and creating the space and the place where we can know every June, where we can be, where we know we're going to be.
Wow. I concur. The unity, the intergenerational dialogue, especially with the intergenerational tyranny that's going on. What that looks like is the fact that you got kids who's ditching school to go protest for climate change, regardless if you don't believe that or not. I do occasionally see glass and all kind of debris in my soil when I'm growing food. And I know that's because I used to live on a landfill. And that's because somebody didn't talk to somebody about recycling. That's an intergenerational block. That's called tyranny, homie. If I tell you that we're dealing with breath and I can't breathe the air, right? I can go down the line. Let's just not talk about I-70 and Farina right now. I grew up with asthma. I also had to deal with other situations where my elders didn't have access to health and wellness. So when you want to change the community, you have to change the way that we have access to health, nature, and not only just a spiritual connection to nature, but we need to understand that we are one with it too. You know what I mean? Our skin is made out of stardust. We special. I ain't got to go down the line of all that, but I'm going to be real with you that a lot of us kind of forgot who we are and our presence and how melanin is a component in technology. You know what I'm saying? So when we start to recognize how valuable we are, then we can also have that self-love, not being this self-hatred, thinking that we got to divide each other. But we do need to understand that we have a big responsibility, being the original man and woman, to be able to connect with each other. And that does mean that so when we see the younger generations, you know what I'm saying, it does mean that we have to pay attention. They're not just protesting for no reason. The civil rights movement was dope, right? Now you got kids out here who want to switch out the acidity in the ocean. maybe get some fresh air to breathe, maybe he's not be able to grow food, you know what I mean? And like trash and all the landfills, they're asking simple things like composting, you know, simple things. So when we start to align with the ideas of being one with the earth, biomimicry, not just under this like whatever fake science, forget this science. Remember this guy named Dr. Ben Chavez, father of the environmental movement, was doing it based off of the fact of what was happening in the communities in the hood. People just couldn't breathe because the water, man, crazy. Let's not talk about Flint, Michigan, but these are the things that we need to shift. And we put our energy and our focus, not just on celebrating and being free, when we got prisons, you know, industrialized ideas of, you know, what we can call a nonprofit industrial complex, you know, people having meetings that have meetings, you know? So things in our city council can shift when we know that we're developing and building communities that's not just for alcohol consumption, you know? So that's what I'm talking about, health and wellness, unifying our community and elevating. I'm gonna leave it right there, you know, but grow some food, B. Save some seeds and teach the kids how to grow food, and then we'll be all right. Just to start there.
We at the end, but we will make time for one question. Is that all right? We can do one question. Go ahead.
Was drawn out here. Robinson, Denver has been a beacon, I think, out there to the world. It is now as a sanctuary place for folks to worship Christ, all other kinds of things and why it's different. I find myself back here, if I just stayed from New York City, felt extremely called to come back to this place. So I just want to say two things. A, as a Black queer person, we are the Black family as well. So if nothing, honor those folks who served in silence for all those times. We're forgotten. We're never gone. So that's one way to look at it, and not just trying to open it up to the new kind of thing. We have always been here. The Black queer slaves who never got to it. That's what we should honor. But my real question is, for Black folks who are wanting to come to Denver, what should we know? What should we be doing when we get here? And I just want to talk about being a prayer here, too many folks coming, I know all of traffic and all that stuff. What do you need? What should you suggest those generations of knowledge? What do we need to know coming to this place? And what are the things that we should be doing to get connected and to know and to, you know, to be a part of this community of this Black?
Might one person want to take that? Anybody?
Yeah. Selfishly, I would tell you every day I wake up and I go to the historic 5 Points neighborhood. To me, the vibration, it's in the bricks. And if you go down there long enough, you can feel the history. You can see I can see the footsteps that were left before me. I can see the Haynes family. I could see the Webbs. I could see the Harrises. I could see the cousins. The pictures are there, the buildings that they left. And if you really kind of study Denver and how Black folks started to move from that neighborhood, you can see it. It's beautiful to me because it'll stretch all the way out to Centennial, right? And there's always a pathway back to the historic 5 Points neighborhood. So I would say from an outsider perspective, even though you can go there and you probably question who owns this now, gentrification, you can just go put your hand on those bricks. You can feel it. I tell you, do that first. Second, there are so many institutions in 5 Points that will help you really ground yourself in the history of Black people in this region. DJ Caven mentioned the African-American West Museum that's on 30th in California. There is the Blair Caldwell Research Library, which is on 2401 Welton Street. There is the Rossonian Hotel. There's the 5 Points Plaza. There's Brother Jeff's Cultural Center. There's the Roxy. There's Cervantes. And if you still go down there, there's people, right, that you go bump into that'll tell you this history, right? I was really amused by the timeline of those pictures that I saw all the way to that 1996 flyer that I'd probably lived through and saw, right? And then there's this gap and there's these people that you go down and talk to. So you have to dig and smile and just be blacked out in 5 points for about 10 minutes. And I guarantee you somebody like me is going to find you and be like, hey, let me bring you in and tell you about this. It might be at Brother Jeff's. It might be Miss Maydella, who's on 27th in California in a barbershop. Frank's, right? And they'll tell you, oh no, Muhammad Ali came and sat in this chair and I cut his hair, right? Or Sonny Liston was here, okay? And those are those footsteps, right? So I challenge folks, Denver has this history, and you can go all around the country. You're not going to find a Juneteenth anywhere in the country but in Denver. And it's because of those footsteps. It's because of that history. And so I get so excited when I hear an African-American, a Black person, whatever we want to call ourselves, tell me they moved from another city to come to Denver. Because now you have the opportunity to start creating those footsteps for someone else to come behind. So I challenge everyone selfishly to say, if you want to get a crash course in Black culture, the best way to do that in Denver is to come to Juneteenth Music Festival, which is Saturday, June 17th and Sunday, June 18th in the historic 5 Points neighborhood. Make your way over. There are some other events as well, include Black Pride events. I will be at the Black Pride Gala, which I believe is tomorrow, Friday night, at the Botanic Gardens. Saturday night after Juneteenth, I'm going to make my way down to 19th and Blake for the Afro Rave. Okay, so what we are doing is bringing the African diaspora back together through music, which I do think is important and good vibration. So it is about a little music, because we might have to call you, get back on this plane and come DJ Cavum, so the gangsters and the Crips can come dance with the Nigerians and the Jamaicans, and we're gonna all be good. And then on Sunday, right, we're gonna come back to the 5 Points. We're gonna listen to Music Soul Child, who is headlining Juneteenth for free on 27th and Welton. And then later on, we might even go down to Temple and party with Music Soul Child. And then on Monday, the actual observance, that's June 19th, 2023, we're going to come back to the 5 Points and we're going to party again. And we're going to eat some barbecue, and you're going to eat some tofu barbecue, right? No additives. And that's why I say, so I'm trying to answer your question as well as promote a few things going on. Hopefully they'll reshare that. But that's my answer to your question, brother.
Well, thank you for that. Real talk. Barney Ford, Nat Love, you know what I mean? Old school movie Posse from Van Peebles gives a good background of like how like creative, you know, Black men coming straight to the West, you know what I mean, leaving the Union, developing families, what Black cowboys look like. My grandfather was one, you know what I'm saying? So I can understand. I come from like the Walker bloodline, you know what I mean, Madam CJ Walker, all the squad over there. You know, so I understand what you're looking for. But yeah, man, you'll find it in the water too. You know, just, you know, get on that 5 Points. Real talk.
So my direct answer to you, don't be afraid to ask questions. And the other thing I would say is you are Black. You are here. You are part of the Black community. Walk with it. Don't be confused.
Oh, I'm not.
But I'm just saying, don't be confused that you are a part of the community, and don't let anybody tell you that you're not. Anybody here who wants to be and is Black is part of the Black community. So that's what you need to know about being here. There is a place for you. We want you here. We don't like the way folks from other places drive, but we get it. But we want you here. We want your intelligence. I was blessed by information tonight. I'm blessed to meet people that I haven't spent time with, new people. We are blessed by you coming. Walk in that.
I want to thank each and every one of you for bringing so much insight and really giving of yourselves and being vulnerable in this space and really sharing this time with us. I want to thank the audience for engaging. I think that this is one of the beginnings of us learning and knowing each other, as you said, and really having a lot more connection between what we're doing at DU and what's happening in our community and vice versa. So thank you. And now I will pass it to my brother John to finish this up.
All right, we can stay up here for a second, just 3 minutes and then we'll be out. So let's give these folks some love for the knowledge that they dropped. But before we do it, I'll get back up because I'm feeling it. So before we do it, can everybody, I'm gonna count us down 1, 2, 3, and then we'll clap. But I want us to really if you feel safe, close your eyes, take a moment. When we do this clap, I want you to listen for the room. When you clap and you hear people clap, we will clap together. And I want you to really listen to how that feels. 3, 2, 1. Right? It's a moment. I am new to Denver, and these places I don't always get this kind of space. And I want us to really take a moment for the folks that don't get this space often, for this space to feel like a hug, right? For this space to feel like a welcome, for this space to feel like your Blackness, your proximity to Blackness, your questioning about what Blackness is can live here and be here. So the folks that know me understand and know that I love Proverbs. So I will leave you with a couple of words. I will start off with, I pointed you the moon and the stars, and yet you only saw the tip of my finger. I pointed you the moon and the stars, and yet you only saw the tip of my finger. Sankofa, it is not taboo to go back and fetch that which you have forgotten. And lastly, sticks in a bundle are unbreakable. I want everybody here to know, for the folks that know this, bear with me, but for the folks who are trying to make this place home, is that Denver is home. Denver can be your home. 5 Points has been my anchor. These folks and their knowledge and what they have done have been my anchor, and I stand on your shoulders, so thank you for that. And hopefully, Black community initiatives here at DU can be a bridge between what the University of Denver is doing and how we can leverage our resources and the ways that we navigate space to be able to really boost and help Black folks thrive in true liberation in the ways that we can. So Juneteenth is celebration, Juneteenth is education, it's service. It's also your job to thrive. So let's do that together. If nobody has said it today, if nobody has told you today, I love you, go in peace. All right, one more time. All right, all right.